Hello, everyone. This is Faheem Jackson, and this is episode 90 of my podcast show, In the Know. This podcast is aimed at trying to guide people through the world with a variety of topics. I am also using this platform to ask questions and try my best to answer these questions with my viewpoints of the world around me. The following episode introduction speech is for the topic of today, and that introduction speech is regarding the 7 sins. This time, what is greed? Have you ever met someone who has this excessive need to have more and more money? They have more than enough to last them, yet they still need more, even when it comes at the cost of someone else losing their finances. We saw this in the case of Bernie Madoff, who robbed investors out of billions of dollars. Now, is money the only form of greed? No, it is not. But it is the most noticeable form that we can connect with, which will render certain reactions. And those reactions are the reactions in which we bestow the title of greed. Before we go on, what is another form of greed that people are familiar with? Oh, I know, power, which we associate with money. Yet not all people who are powerful have the most money. We have politicians who have substantially less than a lot of people in our nation, but they hold a lot of policy power. So with all this said, what is a more clear definition for what is greed? And this is what it is. The definition of greed is the intense and selfish desire for something. We usually correlate money with greed. A greedy person takes a lot more than their fair share of something, most often leaving others with little to nothing once everything is consumed. Now, what separates the greedy person from a glutton is that gluttons overconsume while the person filled with greed has a desire to take more out of more selfish reasons. For example, a glutton focuses more on overconsumption as it pertains to self. They affect themselves more than they do other people. On the other hand, greedy people tend to have a negative externality on society, which we will discuss later with regards to societal effects. See, the greed inside of us tends to manifest itself when we are given an opportunity to have what we want at times via success. From here, we have to make better decisions to keep fighting for more or be happy with what we have. Now, just because you want to have more doesn't automatically make you a greedy person. It's to stop at nothing, even if it leaves victims in your pursuit for more. Here's where you have just tipped the scale. As with envy and gluttony, I'd like to tell you all a story of greed. You see, Jack is the head of a nonprofit organization which handles hundreds of millions of dollars on charitable contributions. He commands a salary of roughly $300,000 per year. Handling the finances of the organization, he is directly able to make decisions with the money flowing throughout the business. And yes, even a nonprofit organization is a bottom line business. Anywho, Jack, for whatever reason, decides to take a little extra from a major donation to the organization. Nothing big enough where anyone would truly notice, but he decided to take a little nonetheless. Now remember what I said before. Jack makes $300K in a year. That is a salary almost 9 times the national average income. So it's safe to say that Jack was doing pretty well already. Then again, the money he stole was minuscule compared to the donations that they annually get. Only problem is greedy people don't just go in and take from the till once. They go in again and again and again. This is what Jack did over time. He went from taking a few thousand to tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands. Did the money add up? It most certainly did add up. He stole from his employer for just over a decade, amassing a staggering amount of money. And a man who took part in this level of embezzlement had to account for the money missing when the IRS, out of nowhere, decided to audit the organization. Well, it seemed like out of nowhere. The government had been observing cash flows for quite some time. They stacked donors' dollars up against the flow of money and realized something was off. They wanted to know where certain amounts that came through the organization were missing. Like if a donor gave $1 million, why is it logged as 950K? These types of logs were recorded over a period of 10 years, and there was one name that stood out the most: Jack. Anytime money was not logged appropriately, his name and signature was not far off. Here's what the government dug into his bank account and realized that the same amount of money missing from the donors matched his account. So if the donor gave $1 million, 950K was logged and 50K was in Jack's bank account. Further investigation proved that he was skimming off the top. He was immediately arraigned and brought up on charges of embezzlement. Shockwaves swept through the organization once employees heard of the news. Furthermore, the organization made a few cuts after Jack's departure. So his excessive desire for more money cost others their livelihood. This is true definition of greedy person, lacking any real empathy or awareness of people around them because they only care about their self-interest. What is greed effects on a person? When someone has the characteristics of a greedy person, they typically have a mind that is very short-sighted. They have longer lasting effects on other people. For themselves, as given the short story above, showed how Jack was ultimately arrested for his role in embezzlement. A lot of people who have excessive greed get caught in themselves in legal battles. The time they stole money doesn't make up for the time they lose in jail. You lose everything and then start over once you're out of jail. And had you have stayed flying straight, you could live a good long-term rather than opulent short-term life. Here's why I say live good, because most of these greedy people do better than most people making legitimate money. It's rare to make an average money and take major risks because illegal returns are generally less. Your hands are on less to take. But don't get me wrong, some of these people who earn 50K per year still as well. They get caught also and serve time congruent with the money stolen. Yet both people who earn more and less, they both lose in the end. Prison awaits with the punishment along with the punitive damages. Now, what is the effects on our society? The lives of many tend to be affected by the decisions of few with regards to greed. Like the short story I told about Jack, the head of the nonprofit organization. In the end, people were laid off as a result of the monetary loss from his embezzlement. And here's the main problem with Jack: the negative externalities associated with how others' worlds could spiral from greedy behavior. So what type of sin forms from this life choice? Because this is what I call a voluntary sin. You may ask the type of sins that form from life choice. One person made a few affecting many. Well, one that is voluntary. And the reason greed is voluntary is simply because you have the choice to say, I will not be taking more than I know I will be negatively affecting the lives of others with. You'll always have this feeling of wanting more. It's natural to have that feeling in some shape or fashion, but how you act is something totally different. Actions separate the sin from every other feeling. Now, some people would even say that the feeling in and of itself is sinful. Yet how do you truly control the urge to at least want to have more than what you do? Well, you can't really. So you just have the strong fundamentalist call you a greedy person because you want more. But in my view, wanting and acting on certain urges are different. Because if Jack would have stolen money from the story I told, if Jack wouldn't have stolen money from the story I told, he'd be free and people wouldn't have gotten laid off. So, with this end statement, why we have to understand greed as a sin. You know, greed is one of those things you get to get you thinking. Have I been a person who was guilty of greed? I know I have been, and to be honest, I still have these thoughts of greed. But actually acting on my greed is something different. Yet, let's assume I were to act on my greed. How would my life be different? Would I be any happier than I am now? Will I get caught if I do decide to engage in greedy behavior that is illegal? Who are the people I would let down if I were to engage in greed? You never think about any of these questions because we are so caught up in our own self-interest. You never think about the consequences or the people you could harm. It's all about what's in it for you, and everyone else is secondary. So, thanks for listening to In the Know, and I'll be bringing you another episode regarding religion. The topic will be covering the 7 deadly sins as a series. The next episode will cover lust.